You've read the books, you've watched the videos. You know intellectually exactly what you're supposed to do with money: spend less than you earn, invest early, avoid debt, think long term. And yet, somehow, none of it sticks. You make a good decision in January and undo it by March. You set a budget on Sunday and break it by Wednesday. You know the math, you just can't seem to live it. Here's the uncomfortable truth nobody tells you: this isn't a math problem, it never was. Somewhere beneath every financial decision you've ever made, there's an older, faster, more powerful system running the show, one that was never built to make you rich. It was built to keep you alive, and the two goals, it turns out, are often in direct conflict. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly how your own brain has been quietly working against your bank account your entire life, and more importantly, what to do about it. We've been sold a comforting lie about poverty and wealth, that the gap between people who build money and people who don't is mostly a gap in knowledge. Learn the right formulas, read the right books, and the outcome follows. But ask yourself something. How many people do you know who can explain compound interest perfectly, who know they should be investing, who understand the math of an emergency fund down to the decimal and still don't do it? The knowledge was never the missing piece. If financial literacy alone solved the problem, personal finance books would have ended poverty decades ago. What's actually happening is something far stranger and far more human. Your brain isn't failing to understand the math. It's actively overriding the math in real time using systems that evolved millions of years before money existed. And once you see how those systems work, you'll never look at a bad financial decision the same way again. For most of human history, the greatest threat to your survival wasn't a bad investment. It was starving next week. Every decision-making shortcut your brain developed was optimized for a world of immediate, physical, life-or-death stakes, not a world of retirement accounts and 30-year mortgages. This matters more than it sounds like it should, because your brain doesn't actually have a separate department for modern financial decisions. It uses the exact same ancient machinery for a $40,000 investment decision that it used for deciding whether to eat the last piece of meat around a fire 50,000 years ago. The wiring is identical. Only the stakes changed. This is why a market downturn triggers something that feels disturbingly close to physical danger: a tightening in the chest, a spike in heart rate, a compulsion to act immediately. Your brain isn't measuring probability and expected value in that moment. It's running the same threat response system that once kept your ancestors from getting eaten. Which means the version of you making high-stakes financial decisions under stress is, neurologically speaking, not that different from a version of you running from a predator. Neither one is built for careful, rational math. And this single mismatch, ancient hardware running modern software, is the root of almost every financial mistake you've ever made without understanding why. Here's an experiment behavioral economists have run for decades. Offer someone $50 today or $100 in a year. A shocking number of people take the $50, even though the math overwhelmingly favors waiting. Now here's the part that should genuinely disturb you. Offer the same people $50 in 5 years or $100 in 6 years. Suddenly, almost everyone chooses to wait for the $100. Same 1-year gap, same doubling of money, completely different decision. This is called present bias, and it reveals something unsettling about how your brain values time. The near future feels disproportionately real and urgent. The distant future feels abstract, almost hypothetical, like it's happening to a different person entirely. Which is exactly the problem, because in a very real sense, your brain treats your future self as a stranger. Neuroscientists have found something remarkable using brain imaging. When people think about themselves in the present, a specific region of the brain lights up. When they think about their future self, the version of them 10, 20, 30 years from now, that same region activates far more weakly. In some cases, thinking about your future self produces brain activity that looks more like thinking about a completely different person than thinking about yourself. This is why retirement contributions feel like a sacrifice for someone else's benefit. Because to a significant part of your brain, they are. You're not being irresponsible when you struggle to save for a version of yourself that feels distant and unreal. You're running headfirst into one of the most well-documented quirks in all of behavioral neuroscience. The good news is, once you know your brain treats future you like a stranger, you can start deliberately building a relationship with that stranger instead of ignoring them. Imagine two scenarios. In the first, someone hands you $100. In the second, you lose $100 you already had. Mathematically, these are mirror images, the same amount of money moving the same distance just in opposite directions. But they don't feel remotely equal. Research consistently shows that the pain of losing money is felt roughly twice as intensely as the pleasure of gaining the same amount. This is called loss aversion, and it's not a minor psychological footnote. It may be one of the single most powerful forces shaping how you interact with money every single day. This explains behavior that looks irrational on the surface, but makes perfect sense once you understand the mechanism. Why do people hold onto a losing stock far longer than they should, waiting for it to come back instead of cutting their losses? Because selling at a loss means officially converting a potential loss into a confirmed one, and confirmed losses hurt in a way that unrealized ones don't, even though the money is functionally identical either way. Why do people avoid checking their investment accounts during a downturn? Because each glance at a shrinking number triggers a fresh wave of that same loss bane, even if the long-term trend is completely healthy. The avoidance isn't laziness. It's your brain protecting you from repeated emotional injury at the exact moment when staying informed and staying calm would actually serve you best. Loss aversion also explains why so many people stay chronically underinsured, underinvested, and overly conservative with money that should be growing. Playing it safe doesn't feel like leaving money on the table. It feels like avoiding pain. And your brain, given the choice, will almost always choose avoiding pain over pursuing gain, even when pursuing the gain is, mathematically, the smarter move. Here's a finding that reframes almost everything we think we know about poor decision-making under financial stress. Researchers have found that scarcity, not having enough of something, whether it's money, time, or food, doesn't just make life harder, it measurably reduces cognitive function. In controlled studies, people experiencing financial scarcity performed significantly worse on cognitive tests than the exact same people did when their financial stress was temporarily relieved. The effect size was comparable to losing an entire night's sleep, or to a meaningful drop in IQ. This wasn't about intelligence differences between people. It was the same individuals performing worse, simply because their minds were consumed by financial worry. This single finding should completely reframe how you think about financial mistakes, your own and other people's. When someone under financial stress makes a decision that looks short-sighted, the instinct is often to judge it as poor character or poor planning. But scarcity research suggests something else entirely. Their brain in that moment is operating with less available bandwidth, because so much of it is consumed by the immediate pressing weight of, how do I get through this week? This creates a vicious loop that's almost cruel in its design. Financial stress reduces the cognitive bandwidth needed to make good long-term financial decisions. Those decisions made under reduced bandwidth often worsen the financial situation, which increases the stress, which reduces the bandwidth even further. The system doesn't just fail to help you escape scarcity, it actively makes escaping harder the longer you're inside it. This is why just be more disciplined is such profoundly bad advice for someone in genuine financial crisis. It's not that discipline doesn't matter. It's that discipline is itself a cognitive resource, and scarcity depletes exactly the resource discipline requires. Understanding this doesn't excuse bad decisions, but it does explain why willpower alone was never going to be the full solution for you or for anyone. There's one more mechanism, quieter than the others and in some ways more powerful than all of them combined. Your financial decisions are constantly being shaped by who you believe yourself to be. If you think of yourself as not a numbers person, you will unconsciously avoid the exact behaviors that would prove that identity wrong, checking your accounts, learning investing basics, tracking your spending, because avoiding them protects the identity even at direct cost to your finances. If you think of yourself as someone who deserves nice things, after a hard week you will find ways to spend that confirm that story, regardless of whether your bank account can sustain it. This is why financial change is so much harder than simply learning new information. You're not just fighting old habits. You're fighting a self-concept that your brain has spent years, sometimes decades, working to keep consistent, because a stable sense of identity, even a financially destructive one, feels safer to your brain than the uncertainty of becoming someone new. This is also why so many people who come into sudden money, inheritances, lottery winnings, big bonuses, end up right back where they started within a few years. The money changed. The identity underneath it, the one quietly making every decision, did not. So if the problem isn't information and it isn't willpower alone, what actually works? The first shift is making the future feel real, not abstract. Some of the most effective interventions ever tested for improving retirement savings involve something disarmingly simple: showing people an age-progressed image of their own future face before they make a savings decision. When future you stops being an abstract stranger and starts looking like an actual person, the brain's present bias weakens measurably. You don't need a lab for this. Writing a letter to your future self or simply picturing them in specific, vivid detail before a major financial decision activates the same shift. The second shift is removing decisions from the moment they're hardest to make well. Since scarcity and stress degrade decision-making exactly when money decisions feel most urgent, the solution isn't to try harder in that moment, it's to make the decision in advance, while your bandwidth is intact, and automate it so your depleted, stressed future self never has to decide at all. This is why automatic transfers outperform willpower with remarkable consistency. They remove the decision from the exact moment your brain is least equipped to make it well. The third shift is reframing loss aversion instead of fighting it. Since your brain feels losses roughly twice as intensely as equivalent gains, you can use that asymmetry deliberately, framing savings not as a loss of spending power today, but as protection against a future loss you can vividly imagine. The same wiring that keeps people stuck can, reframed correctly, become the exact force that keeps them consistent. And the fourth shift, the hardest and most important, separating your financial decisions from your identity entirely. Not "I'm bad with money," but "I made a decision using an old mental system under specific conditions and I can make a different decision under different conditions." That single reframe repeated enough times doesn't just change your finances, it changes which version of yourself is doing the deciding. None of this was ever really about intelligence or effort or moral failure. It was about a brain built for a world of predators and scarcity, still running the exact same programming in a world of interest rates and index funds, a brain that treats your future self like a stranger, that feels losses twice as sharply as gains, that gets measurably dumber under financial stress, and that will defend a losing identity simply because it's familiar. You were never just bad with money. You were a person with an ancient operating system trying to run modern software it was never designed for, and nobody ever handed you the manual. Now you have it. The question that remains isn't whether you understand your own mind well enough to change your finances. It's whether you're willing to stop blaming the outcome and start rewiring the system that's been quietly producing it all along. Your brain didn't keep you poor because something is wrong with you. It kept you poor because it was doing exactly what it evolved to do: protect you from yesterday's dangers, using tools that were never built for today's decisions. The moment you see the system clearly is the moment it stops running you silently in the background. That's not a flaw in your character, that's just the first real chance you've ever had to finally take the wheel.